So you were named one of Time's 100 most influential people of 2024. Congratulations, and tell me, what
Thank
does this
you.
mean to you?
I honestly, it feels kind of wild and surreal to to be honest. They told me about it a little while ago, but it really wasn't until I saw the website yesterday that it actually felt real.
Well, this isn't the first award you have received for your storytelling. You have a Pulitzer Prize winning podcast called Stolen. Tell our viewers a little bit about it and how it has evolved.
Well, Stolen is a podcast that I've been working on with Spotify and Gimlet Media. And each season is kind of its own story, its own investigation into a mystery in an Indigenous community. And so the first season focused on the disappearance of a woman named Jermaine Charlo from Missoula, Montana. And over 8 episodes, it's a deep dive into our investigation into her disappearance, but also, really trying to help people understand the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous people and the crisis of violence in our communities. The second season, which is the season that we won the Pulitzer and the Peabody for, was actually a personal story for me. It was an investigation into my father's experience at an Indian residential school in Canada. Surviving St. Michael's was, again, like another 8 episode investigation deep dive and into a single residential school in Canada, but also, our attempt to try to find one of the Catholic priests who abused my father at the school. And through that investigation, we also, really try to understand the ongoing effects of the residential school and boarding school system and how they're continuing to impact our families and communities. And this third season that is just out is called Stolen: Trouble in Sweetwater, and we investigate the disappearances of 2 women on the Navajo Nation, and also investigate the crisis of policing in the community and look at the impacts, I guess, of some of the issues of criminal justice on the Navajo Nation. And that's going to be our last season of Stolen with Spotify. Our show was canceled, so we're looking for a new home for Stolen, but we're hopeful that we'll be able to continue this work in some way.
These are incredibly, obviously, sensitive topics, as you mentioned, and something that you also mentioned was something that a lot of our communities still deal with today. And they're
Mhm.
stories that are familiar to Indigenous communities, but are very new to other people. Why is it so important, though, to share these stories, even though they're so difficult to tell and can bring up those really hard truths?
Our stories are also the stories of these 2 countries that we live in. This is uh, everyone's history that they don't understand. This is everyone's story that they've only been told part of. The truth of Canada and the truth of the United States and our history, and this is something I think that affects us all. And the sooner that people can realize that, the better off we'll all be. When I first started reporting on the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Canada, I remember feeling so hesitant and so concerned about bringing up painful memories and traumatic memories for family members, because they were already dealing with the loss of a loved one, whether it was because of a death or disappearance. But we know in our communities that there's ongoing trauma that is often experienced throughout our lives. And I remember, as someone who experienced trauma myself, as a child and after that, it was something I was very sensitive to. I felt like it was so important to tell these stories, but also I wanted to do it in the most sensitive, like, to be really sensitive to people's experiences, as sensitive as I could be. Um, and then once I kind of kept doing this work, I started seeing actually that when you're given space to share your story in a safe way, in a place where you feel respected and where you're given some power and agency over your own story, it can actually be healing to share even difficult stories and difficult truths. And really that's what Surviving St. Michael's was for me. It was such a personal story about my own abuse, about my father's abuse, and about my family. But it really, because as the head of Stolen and the host of the show, I had so much agency and so much support from the incredible team I work with at Stolen to take on a story like that, and it was such a positive and powerful healing experience. That I think that's been a lesson that I've learned through this. That this is these are painful truths, but they're so important to know and understand. And I think there's finally some recognition of how important our stories are. But I think that there's almost like an impulse to push past it and to talk about reconciliation and how to move forward. And I think that we really need to know and understand the full truth before talking about reconciliation. And I think that's so much of what journalism can do. And that's our role is helping to expose the truth. And that's something that I feel like passionate about as well.
So, for those who have yet to listen to your podcast, where can they find it?
Anywhere you listen to podcasts, on Spotify or on Apple, really anywhere. And the final season, Stolen, Trouble in Sweetwater, is all out now. So you can binge listen, and all of our previous seasons are also available. And if you still, that's not enough, you can listen to the previous podcast I did with CBC called Missing and Murdered. And hopefully have more news soon about what's coming next for us.
Connie Walker, we can't wait to see what you do next. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Paris.